There is a particular kind of emptiness that does look like tragedy. Your calendar is full, your body moves, your messages arrive. Yet something in you feels uninhabited. Not a clinical diagnosis, but a metaphysical bruise. The suspicion that the story you live is not the story you are. Traditional alchemy begins exactly here. Before any gold, there is a vessel scrubbed clean. What the old texts call first matter. Experience reduced to its simplest fact, without decoration. And notice what that implies. The void is not the enemy of meaning. It is meaning's laboratory. This documentary won't offer a branded awakening, a 5-step dopamine ritual, or a product to replace your personality. It will treat emptiness as a signal from the deeper psyche, the part that refuses counterfeit wholeness. We'll map how the hollow forms, why it intensifies in modern life, and how to work with it safely, with the sobriety of philosophy and the patience of inner craft. No theatrics, only method. Begin. To understand the void with precision, we need to separate 3 things modern culture blends into one fog: depression, boredom, and initiatory emptiness. Depression collapses movement. It thickens time, turns desire into lead. Boredom is the mind starving for stimulation because it has forgotten how to listen. Initiatory emptiness is different. It is the moment the psyche stops cooperating with the persona, the social mask you polished until you mistook it for a face. Depth psychology names this a crisis of meaning, but not because meaning is absent, because the old meanings no longer metabolize your life. The psyche, like the body, rejects what it cannot digest. When your work, relationships, beliefs, even your spirituality become performative, the inner world responds with silence, not punishment, refusal. The void is the psyche's strike against counterfeit living. Ancient Hermetic writers framed this as forgetfulness, the human being mesmerized by surfaces, hypnotized into thinking the visible is the whole. In that hypnosis, you may gain success and still lose soul. Emptiness is often the first honest thing you feel in years. In the older alchemical manuals, the first phase is almost always described as a blackening. The matter turns dark, foul, ruined. Modern readers romanticize this, but the original point is blunt. Whatever is false in the compound must rot before anything true can be stabilized, applied inwardly. This is what emptiness often signals: the beginning of the negredo, the breakdown of borrowed identities. Here's the non-sensational version. The psyche can build a deeper life on top of an unexamined one. So it withdraws libido, interest, vitality, meaning, until you can no longer keep performing your own story. That withdrawal feels like a void, but it is also an operation, a forced simplification. The great work starts when you stop adding and begin subtracting. This is why commercial spirituality struggles with the void. It sells addition, new labels, new practices, new certainty. Alchemy insists on decomposition first. If your emptiness is asking for anything, it's asking for honesty about what you were living for and what you're reliving as. One of the clearest lenses here comes from a certain Swiss psychiatrist who treated medieval alchemy less as chemistry and more as a projected psychology. He noticed something startling. When the alchemists described furnaces, vessels, dragons, kings, and putrefaction, they were also describing recurring inner events, patterns that appear whenever a personality is being reorganized from the roots. In his view, the void is not a spiritual failure. It's what happens when the ego loses its monopoly on reality. The ego wants continuity. I am this person, with this plan, with these beliefs. But the deeper psyche wants wholeness, not comfort. When wholeness presses upward, the first symptom is often loss of meaning. Not because life is meaningless, but because the ego's meanings are too small to contain the emerging material. This is where people panic and misread the signal. They try to fix emptiness by intensifying noise, more content, more consumption, more identity. Yet emptiness is cured by volume. It is approached by containment, creating a vessel sturdy enough to hold uncertainty without immediately converting it into slogans. Hermetic philosophy offers a sober axiom. The human being is a small world, a microcosm, mirroring larger patterns of order and chaos. But this is fortune cookie mysticism. It's a disciplined way of noticing correspondences, how cycles in nature resemble cycles in psyche, how collapse and renewal repeat across scales. The void you feel can be read as a microcosmic echo of a universal rhythm. Contraction before expansion, winter before spring, silence before speech. In this framework, emptiness is not nothing happening. It is a withdrawal of form, a tide going out so that something else can come in. When you treat it as an error, you interrupt the rhythm. When you treat it as a phase, you can work with it. Practically, this means shifting from the question, how do I get rid of this, to what is being removed, and why? What beliefs no longer hold? What relationships are sustained only by habit? What ambitions were never truly yours? The void strips life down to essentials not to punish you, but to reveal what remains when performance stops. And here we need rigor. Not every emptiness is sacred. Sometimes it's burnout, sleep debt, isolation, untreated trauma. Discernment is part of the work. To make this usable, let's just borrow an alchemical model that divides inner life into three operating principles: the fixed, the fiery, and the fluid. Think of them less as mystical substances and more as functions of psyche. The fixed principle is structure, body, habit, responsibility, the parts of you that keep going when inspiration disappears. In emptiness, this shows up as bare survival, brushing teeth, answering emails, functioning without feeling. It can look soulless, but it also prevents collapse. The task is not to despise it, but to keep it clean. Sleep, food, movement, basic order. A cracked vessel cannot hold transformation. The fiery principle is desire and direction, the spark that makes life feel worth moving toward. When emptiness arrives, it often means this fire has been scattered into compulsions, scrolling, proving, chasing. The solution is not to manifest more fire, but to ask what contaminated it. What desires are borrowed? What goals are defenses? The fluid principle is mediation, imagination, meaning-making, the capacity to reinterpret life without lying to yourself. In emptiness, this fluidity can sour into cynicism. Meaning becomes naive. Hope becomes cringe. The work is to restore a flexible, honest imagination. Neither blind belief nor dead reduction. Now, if you come from Gnostic symbolism, the void can be understood through a different vocabulary. Not sin or failure, but forgetting. The human being falls asleep inside a world of surfaces and mistakes that sleep for reality. In many Gnostic myths, the tragedy is not that you are evil, it's that you are distracted. The soul becomes addicted to the outer show and slowly loses contact with its own depth. Read with psychological sobriety. This forgetting is what happens when attention is colonized. Your inner life gets outsourced. Algorithms choose your focus. Trends choose your values. Status chooses your identity. Eventually, something in you refuses. The refusal feels like emptiness because the old sources of stimulation no longer satisfy. That is not pathology. It is immune response. Here's the crucial distinction. Gnosis is not a collection of secret facts. It's a direct, lived recognition, a shift in awareness. That's why genuine traditions were wary of spectacle. They understood how easily mystery becomes entertainment. The void, in this light, is an invitation to wake up from second-hand living. The question becomes practical. What practices return attention to you? Not as a brand, but as a disciplined inward orientation. Alchemical work is not a mood. It's a sequence. The old operators insisted that stages must be completed, not understood. So let's translate the first operation into modern, non-mystified terms. Calcination, the burning away of false identity. Calcination begins when life applies heat to your self-image. Sometimes it's dramatic. Betrayal, illness, loss, humiliation. Sometimes it's quiet, the slow realization that you're reliving someone else's script. Either way, the effect is similar. Your usual strategies stop working. The persona cracks. You can charm your way out. You can productivity hack your way through. And in that crack, emptiness appears. This is where many people reach for quick spiritual anesthesia. They replace one identity with a higher one. Enlightened, chosen, initiated. But that's just soot on the same mask. Calcination demands a harsher honesty. What you thought you were must be reduced to ash. Practically, this stage looks like inventory. What roles do you play to earn belonging? What emotions do you forbid because they threaten the image? What parts of you are exiled to keep the story coherent? The goal is not self-hatred. It's purification, removing what was never truly you so the work has real material to transform. After fire comes water, dissolution. If calcination shatters the mask, dissolution melts the rigid certainty underneath it. The ego hates this phase because it can no longer stand on firm conclusions. Emotions that were frozen now thaw. Grief returns with its receipts. Anger rises from decades of politeness. Shame bubbles up. Not to punish you, but to be seen, named, and metabolized. This is where the void often deepens. Not a clean emptiness, but a dark, thick one. The sense that everything inside is turning to mud. Alchemical texts call this putrefaction, a necessary breakdown of the old compound. Depth psychology describes something similar as a descent into the unconscious, where previously rejected material surfaces in dreams, moods, bodily symptoms, sudden memories. Here's the disciplined move. Don't dramatize it and don't romanticize it. Dissolution is not proof you are awakening, and it's not proof you are broken. It's proof that your psyche is becoming more honest than your persona allowed. Practically, this phase requires containment. Fewer stimulants, more sleep. Less doom scrolling, more silence. Some form of witnessing practice. Journaling, therapy, contemplative walking, meditation without performance. You are not trying to feel better. You are letting the psyche liquefy what was too rigid to transform. Then comes the operation most modern seekers skip: separation, discernment. When everything is dissolved, it feels like, I am this chaos. Separation teaches, no, you are in the chaos, but you are not identical with it. The work here is to distinguish what belongs to your core from what was implanted. Family narratives, cultural scripts, old trauma reflexes, inherited fear. This is where depth psychology becomes practical technology. You begin to observe patterns with precision. This panic is to prophecy. It's an old alarm system. This ambition is to my calling. It, compensation. The spiritual hunger is to escape, but this particular practice is. Separation is not cynicism. It's a moral act, refusing to live by unconscious coercion. In older mystical language, this is the art of weighing spirits, testing inner impulses by their fruits. Do they expand responsibility or inflate ego? Do they increase clarity or produce foggy grandiosity? Do they deepen relationship with reality or replace reality with fantasy? A crucial warning. Separation is not done by reading more doctrines. It's done by sustained attention. It may involve therapy, honest dialogue, dream work, and deliberate experiments in behavior. Changing routines, setting boundaries, withdrawing from environments that feed the false self. If emptiness is the laboratory, separation is the moment you label the elements correctly. So you stop drinking poison thinking it's medicine. Once you can distinguish the elements, the work becomes less chaotic and more architectural. Conjunction. The first true union. This is not positive thinking, and it's not spiritual fireworks. It's the psyche discovering a third position beyond its old civil war. The ego stops trying to defeat the shadow and begins to negotiate with it. In Jung's language, conjunction is the transcendent function, holding opposites in tension, without rushing to a cheap conclusion, until a new insight emerges that neither side could produce alone. Practically, you begin to integrate disowned traits. Assertiveness you called selfish, vulnerability you called weak, intuition you called irrational, discipline you called boring. The void becomes less like annihilation and more like space, room for something new to form. This is often when synchronicity increases, not as supernatural proof, but as the mind noticing meaningful patterns because it is no longer anesthetized. You make a choice aligned with your deeper nature, and life responds with strange coherence. The right book, the right person, the right phrase at the right time. Dawn, turn that into a marketplace of signs. Treat it as feedback. The psyche is reorganizing. But conjunction is early relief, not completion. Many people stop here and build a new integrated identity that is just a smarter mask. True conjunction stays humble. It remains unfinished, living, and accountable. Next is fermentation, the arrival of new life, and the most easily misunderstood stage. Fermentation doesn't feel like constant bliss. It feels like fresh energy with a foreign accent. Something in you wakes up. But it's not the old manic drive that chased approval. It's quieter, steadier, often paired with a strange grief for the years you lived half asleep. Classical alchemy says fermentation requires a leaven, a tiny catalyst that changes the whole substance. Psychologically, this might be a genuinely numinous moment, a dream that cuts through denial, a piece of art that breaks your defenses, an encounter with a teacher who doesn't sell you identity, only discipline. Sometimes it's a confrontation with suffering that makes you drop trivialities forever. But fermentation is also decay. Old attachments continue to rot as the new pattern forms. That's the paradox. You can feel more alive and more tender at the same time. Commercial spirituality tries to delete the rot and sell only the glow. Alchemy refuses that lie. The bubbling, the instability, the awkwardness. These are signs that transformation is biochemical, not cosmetic. Practically, your task is to protect the ferment. Dawn, expose new life to the old environments that killed it. Reduce social noise. Choose simpler rhythms. Keep promises to your body. Let curiosity replace compulsion. If emptiness was the strike against counterfeit living, fermentation is the first evidence that the psyche approves your new honesty. Now we reach the stage that looks boring on camera, but changes everything in life. Distillation, repeated purification. The alchemists emphasized cycles. Evaporate, condense, repeat. Not once, many times. Psychologically, this is the slow refinement of awareness. You stop mistaking a single insight for liberation. You stop treating one breakthrough as a permanent state. Distillation is how you learn the difference between true emptiness and numbness. True emptiness is alive, spacious, attentive. Numbness is deadening, avoidant, often paired with compulsive distraction. Distillation is how you learn the difference between solitude that nourishes the soul and isolation that feeds resentment. The mind can imitate spiritual poverty as an excuse to withdraw from responsibility. Distillation exposes the imitation. This stage also reveals subtler projections. At first you see obvious delusions. Later you see refined ones. The need to be the awakened one. The secret pride of being beyond society. The addiction to being the person who understands darkness. Distillation is the humiliation of precision. It keeps you honest. Practically, keep a record. Track your moods, triggers, dreams, and energy. Not to obsess, so you can detect patterns. Maintain one consistent practice, modest but daily. Meditation, breathwork, prayer without theatrics, active imagination, therapy, homework. Distillation is not intensity, it's fidelity. The psyche trusts consistency more than drama. Finally, coagulation, the crystallization of a new center. In alchemical language, this is the stone, but psychologically it's simpler and harder. A stable axis inside you that does depend on applause, novelty, or panic. Not rigid identity, inner gravity. You stop chasing meaning as a product and start living meaning as a practice. Coagulation does not eliminate the void. It transforms your relationship to it. The void becomes what mystics called a fertile nothing, a silent ground where choices can be made without compulsion. You can enter stillness without feeling erased. You can be alone without becoming brittle. You can experience uncertainty without immediately outsourcing your mind to gurus, algorithms, or ideology. This is why the completed work is ethical. When your center stabilizes, you have fewer excuses. You can say, "I didn't know." You begin to feel the weight of your actions, how your unconsciousness affects others, how your integrity shapes your environment. In older esoteric schools, this was the burden of the adept. Knowledge is not privilege. It's obligation. So the gold is not superiority. It's responsibility with clarity. The stone is applied to ordinary life, work, relationships, money, sexuality, conflict, service. If your transformation cannot enter the marketplace of daily existence, it is not transformation. It is theater. But there is one last correction we must make, because the modern seeker is constantly targeted. Emptiness will be exploited. Someone will try to sell you a ready-made identity to plug the hole. An instant lineage, a frequency, a ritual kit, a promise of certainty. The void is profitable. That's why your discernment must remain sharper than your longing. The Hermetic insight is sober. The work is not accomplished by believing harder. It is accomplished by enduring the sequence, burning, dissolving, separating, uniting, fermenting, refining, and stabilizing, until your life becomes congruent with your deepest nature. This is not an escape from the world, but a return to it with less self-deception. So if you feel empty, don't rush to decorate it. Ask what is being removed. Ask what is refusing to cooperate with your persona. Build a clean vessel. Body, rhythm, honesty, attention. Let the void teach you what noise cannot. Because in the end, the void is not a lack. It is a threshold. It is the psyche's demand for reality. And if you meet it with courage, without sensationalism, without shopping for salvation, the emptiness that terrified you becomes the space in which a truer life can take form.